This is very special because it is everything you wanted to know about Pro Tools 11, but were perhaps afraid to ask or didn't know who to ask. So Mike and I have been, best way to say it, basically we had to sign with some blood and a bit of paper, and we got information early on the new version of Pro Tools 11. So we've had a behind the scenes, we've had some briefings. So we wanted to put this show together so we could share with you all that we know thus far. I think it's most of it, but we're also going to tell you about some goodies that we're going to point you to at the end of this show. Now, we're making this as a special podcast, but we're also going to make a video version we're going to put on YouTube to give you screen grabs and stuff like that. The software isn't out there yet. There's some working copies you'll see at shows, but there aren't any actually in the wild yet. So we haven't even touched the software yet. So this is based upon some briefings, some stuff that we've seen, shown to us. But other than that, we're going to give you screen grabs and some video footage that you can see as we talk along this. So if you want to watch this on YouTube, then we'll give you the YouTube link. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to listen to this on the tube or on your iPod or iPad or iPhone or whatever, or on your MP3 player, then you can download the podcast instead. So welcome to the Pro Tools 11 launch podcast. So Mike, let's kick off. It's going to be, so by the time you hear this, they're just announcing it to the press at NAB in Las Vegas. Mike will be there. So we've done a pre-record of this. This is Thursday afternoon before Mike goes to NAB and before I go to Mesa. So what we're going to do on this show is I'm going to cover the music side and Mike's going to cover the post-production side, and hopefully we will go through it bit by bit. So Mike, over to you first. What do you want to sort of say first as we kick this off?
Yeah, well, I think this has been, we've spoken many times about the Pro Tools software and that it's got so many old elements in it that's been built on and added to. It's like a little cottage that's had an extension put on, a back room, a loft conversion. It's had, but all along the lines, it's all the basic foundations are all the old foundations going back to the year dot. So for older Pro Tools users that will remember, we had a separate application. When you booted Pro Tools, you'd also find that there was a little application called DAE, the DigiDesign Audio Engine, would also boot. And then you think, okay, that's all gone away. I haven't seen that for ages. Well, no, you haven't seen it, but it's still there under the hood, buzzing away and managing Pro Tools for you. So Avid have had a real opportunity just to be able to wipe the slate clean and not even start from the ground up, but actually build a completely new application with right from foundations, integrating all the 64-bit code, getting everything sorted, new elements here, there, and everywhere. So the great news about that is that lots and lots of things that we've wanted are now available.
Yeah, and I think the thing to say, if you want to think of comparisons, if you're a Mac user, it's like going from OS 9 to OS X, and that big transition that Apple had to do. If you're a Windows user, I think that was like going from Windows, the old 32-bit version of Windows, to the 64-bit versions.
Yeah, I think XP to Windows 7 would probably be
exactly.
The sort of...
was it. So it is important to say that this has taken so long, and we know some of the backstories to some of the new features that we're going to talk about on today's show, because there are a few things that we that couldn't happen in the old version. They just couldn't happen. It wasn't actually technically possible. So the best way to think about the new version of Pro Tools 11, is the only thing it does is open your old sessions. Apart from that, it's a brand new application. It will feel at times like you're using the same application, but it's not the same application. It's a 64-bit application, brand new.
Absolutely. So it's definitely RIP DAE, Digital Design Audio Engine, and we can safely say now, long live AAE, the Avid Audio Engine. But it's not a name change, as Russ has quite rightly pointed out. This is a completely different application. So we've got this new Avid Audio Engine. What it means is we get loads more processing power than Pro Tools 10 on the same hardware configurations. So you can have loads more tracks, loads more virtual instruments, much more complicated mixes, and they've done so much under the hood with this brand new application because we're no longer fighting legacy code. So it makes such a huge difference. So I think, as you've already intimated, Russ, the first key thing here is we are now dealing with 64 bits. Now, obviously, we've had 64-bit processing, but this is different. This is to do with memory, isn't it?
It is, and the thing to consider here is if you remember, sometimes your Pro Tools system would be working if you had your activity monitor open when you were using your usage monitor open on Pro Tools. Suddenly you'd see big spikes going on. That shouldn't happen in the new version of Pro Tools 11 because it's actually managing the memory much better. The old system was trying to use old technology to do new processes. Now it's a new technology doing new processes. So the AAE, the Avid Audio Engine, is going to really help to manage memory, to manage RAM, which I suppose moves us on to our next point, Mike. The first thing that everybody's been screaming for forever has been 64-bit, and Pro Tools 11 brings with it 64-bit performance. And for those of you who have never quite understood what we mean when we talk about 64-bit processing, any application on a computer, if it's a 32-bit application, by the very nature of the application environment, it can only access about 3 gigabytes of memory, minus also the memory that's also being used to operate other stuff as well on your computer. So it didn't matter whether you put 3 gig or 10 gig or 30 gig in your machine, Pro Tools couldn't access most of that. And where it really started to suffer was when you used things like virtual instruments, or you had large sessions that were using, which were samplers that were drawing data back off drives and holding them in memory. So for virtual instrument users, lightning performance now, none of that falling over anymore. And you'll see in the slide that we're going to show you now, if you're watching this, just a snapshot from a Mac of this working with just over 10 gigabytes. Pro Tools really accessing 11 gigabytes of memory. Really exciting, Mike.
Absolutely. I mean, it really is. It'll make such a difference, as you say, for VI users. But in the post world, I mean, film mixes, which can be across a huge number of tracks, sometimes on multiple Pro Tools systems, those systems are going to run so much more smoothly. You're not going to need perhaps as many Pro Tools systems, because one of the ways the film boys got around it was to have 2, 3, 4, 5 Pro Tools systems all running simultaneously. And so one of the things that we can do is, because the new 64-bit performance accessing all that additional memory means that we can run much, much bigger Pro Tools sessions on the same system than we could before. So great news across the board.
Okay, the other good news, and this made Mike happy the minute he saw it, was, and of course something else everybody's been screaming out for, is at last we have offline bounce. That's both in native and in DSP systems as well. Now, not any old offline bounce. Again, Avid have worked very hard to, and I think you'll see, I don't know if you've seen the ad yet for this, but and I've talked with the Avid people about this, the guys over at Avid, is that not all offline bounce is the same, and you can't always, and the way to test an offline bounce is to do a real bounce. Then, what we mean by a real-time bounce is that it bounces it actually renders the audio at the same time, in the same time it takes to play it. With an offline bounce, it will do it in the case of Pro Tools 100 up to 150 times faster. Now that's brilliant if you're doing a 1 hour radio show like ours, Mike. And I know every Monday night when we're getting the podcast ready, there's that time. Now, but however, often what would happen if you did a real-time bounce and a non-real-time bounce and you brought them back in and you did a phase reverse on one, what should happen is you should then hear silence, because they are phase accurate, sample accurate copies of the same audio. Now, in a lot of cases, that wasn't the case. So Avid have done some work behind the scenes to make sure that this is top-end fast bouncing. Mike, do you want to take that for a moment?
Indeed. I mean, the critical thing is A, that it's really fast. I mean, 100 up to 150 times fast means that a 1 hour show we can do in well under a minute. And the number of times I used to do 1 hour radio programs, and remember at 58 minutes, Pro Tools would come up with that lovely error message, can't keep up, sorry, bog off, not doing it. And you would taking a big deep breath, and you'd have to start the bounce again. Now, obviously, some of us use bounce track, so it isn't quite as catastrophic, but that ability to be able to bounce a show very, very fast is just absolutely phenomenal. But it gets even better, because, as Russ was already intimated, not all offline bounces are the same. And so with Avid, have spent ages working at this to get it sounding really, really good. But more importantly, what they want to do is to make sure that that an offline bounce is perfect. It is the same every time, because that's one of the issues with some offline bounces, is that you do an offline bounce once, you do it again, and you don't get the same file. So what you can do is, if you were to take a real-time bounce and then take an offline bounce, put them together, antiphase it, null it out, there will be nothing left. And you can try that with a number of other offline bounce systems, and you may well find that you have things left, because they wanted to make sure that it was absolutely on the nose. And one of the other things they've done is to get the automation to happen exactly when it was meant to happen. So this whole new offline bounce facility is going to make a huge difference. In audio post work, when we're creating stems, music and effects stems, just dialogue stems, commentary stems, music stems, effects stems, which we often have to do to deliver these different separate elements of the mix so they can be remixed for different foreign language situations. They can take forever to play out. And so again, to be able to do this in non-real time is just going to be a real time and time saver, and presumably for music guys, this is also going to make a big difference.
Yes, I was about to say that one of the things that that probably won't be clear when you read the information on the Avid site, but we know is the case. We have been told is that you can choose the stem that you bounce. So, for example, if you've got a keyboard track, and let's say, for example, let's choose a memory hog Omnisphere. Let's say you've got an amazing string part in Omnisphere, and it's just pulling your Pro Tools system down, which is probably going to be less likely in Pro Tools 11 anyway, because of 64-bit and a few other things we're going to tell you about in a while. What you can do is you can choose that track as the output stem, and then you can tick the box re-import after bounce. You can do a non-real-time bounce. It will bounce it out. It will bring it back in as the stereo pair. You can then disable the original track that has the virtual instrument on it, and you have a track freeze.
Yeah, so we've
Brilliant.
got, so this is not just offline bounce, it's also that long requested track freeze feature, which, as you say, for musicians will be an absolute wondrous opportunity.
Now, it doesn't just end there, which is one of the key features that I think is really interesting and really exciting, especially for musicians, but I'm sure also for voiceover work as well, or lip syncing, let's say ADR work, is that Avid have done some magic in Pro Tools, in this new version of Pro Tools. It has both a input and an output buffer. Now, you don't alter the output buffer. Avid do some trickery in the background, which means it's auto-adjusting for the size of the session. But what you can do then, so for example, you could have a 32 sample buffer to lay down, let's say, keyboards or a lip sync vocal part in post, and at the same time, in the background, the output buffer may be running at 2048. So if you imagine the old days, you had this trouble where you had to compromise. Do I have some latency because I have a long buffer time, so my keyboards are slightly out of time, or my drums are, or do I have it keep falling over? Now you have the best of both worlds. Now I think that's genius, Mike.
Absolutely, totally, because it's always been an issue, and it's one of the reasons why I've always spent money on an HD and now an HDX system, is because I wanted that guaranteed no latency. Now, with this new Pro Tools 11, it does mean that you're not fighting that latency issue, because you can push down the input buffer, be able to get that performance bang on the mark, bang on the beat, not worry about voiceovers not hearing themselves in the headphones really tightly. And so either way, it works really, really well, but you've got that output buffer keeping everything sorted so that the system doesn't fall over.
Now, Mike, let's talk about automation, because obviously automation is big in the post world.
Yeah.
There's some new stuff there, yeah?
There is, because one of the issues that a number of times, as I've certainly experienced, I know a number of other people experience, you do a mix, you do a bounce, you run it out, and the automation doesn't actually quite happen at the moment that you wanted it to happen. So if there's a sudden fader move, a pan move, whatever, and you expect it to happen on a particular word, when you come to play it out, it doesn't always happen at that moment. And so often I would actually run automation, especially if I was reprogramming a plugin. I'd need to run it in free space a few moments before I needed it to make sure that Pro Tools had reprogrammed and got itself sorted in time. Well, that's, again, another thing that is completely in the past. Because just as your media files are all time-stamped, so there's a little bit of information in each file saying it's going to play at this particular time, whether that's in bars and beats or minutes and seconds or feet and frames, whatever it is, that stamp information is in the file. Now they've done that same time stamping with all the plugin automation. So if you tell a plugin to change a parameter at 14 hours, 12 minutes, 15 seconds and 22 frames, it will do it every time exactly at that point. And so again, that's another thing that Pro Tools 11 will bring to the table, because they've been able to rewrite and rebuild the application from the foundations all the way up.
Now that sounds really exciting. And again, back to offline bounce. It also does it in offline bounce as well, doesn't it, Mike? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else have we got in this new? Can I just say, actually, in the middle of this conversation, because Mike, I think you're going to move on to Workspace in a moment, which has always been something I hated in original versions. Is that I think the best way to describe this new version of Pro Tools is it's not a boob job. It's a heart job.
Yes.
They've gone into Pro Tools and they've basically rebuilt it from the inside out. It's not a cosmetic job. And now I know a lot of people would have said, hey, can we have a new key? Can we have another keyboard? Can we have a synth? Can we have this and that? But it's none of those things. But what it is everything that drove us all crazy has been sorted and more. Because I said to the Avid people, and Mike will know this because we do talk to them all the time behind the scenes, listen, if all you're going to give us is 64-bit and offline bounce, then don't really give me a call, because we're expecting that. Let's have some really interesting stuff as well, which we're coming up to. Some of it you've already heard, but there's some more coming up as we carry on with this discussion and this show.
Yeah. So, Russ, what are we getting in the Workspace browser? Because that seemed a very curious place to get new features.
Yeah, Workspace was supposed to be the place where all of your assets, let's say sample libraries, loops and stuff, were the place where you would go in and you could audition them. It was locked in with things like elastic audio. So, for example, you could play a bass, you could have a drum part going already in Pro Tools, and then you could go into Workspace, you could choose rhythmic, and you could get it to time to the rest of the Pro Tools session, and then you could audition it. The problem was it was just so convoluted. It was so hard to find things. It didn't sort very well. It wasn't a good way to manage samples. It certainly wasn't a good way to try and get through things. They've worked hard on that now, and I understand from the conversations I've been having with the team at Avid that literally as you start to type into the Workspace now, let's say you're a post guy and you're looking for a car horn, the minute you start typing the word CAR, all the car horns will start proliferating in the Workspace.
That
very
is just
quick.
Phenomenal, because
very fast. It was useless before almost.
I don't use a third-party sound effects library software. I actually use Workspace, and you especially the first time you put the keywords in, and you go and have a cup of coffee whilst it does the search. So this is just phenomenal that we can, it actually starts doing a search as you're typing. So it's that dynamic. It's like Google, it's like so many other search devices that actually start refining your search as you're typing. So that is just so much good news.
It is very good news. So, Mike, what's the next thing that's taken your fancy as you've been looking at this?
Well, this whole feature of being able to automate tracks whilst you record them, because of course, prior to Pro Tools 11, if you are recording or you've even got a track in input-only mode, you couldn't automate the automation. That was just locked out. The words were in italics and you couldn't access this. Well, now with the Pro Tools 11 and the whole 64-bit, it is possible to automate a track that is either in record or in record ready, i.e. in input mode. Now you think, what on earth would that be any use for? Well, it has two really obvious applications, certainly for me. Anybody working in live sound,
yes,
you can be doing a live mix, and as you do your live mix, you can be moving the faders on your control surface, and Pro Tools is recording that automation, all the automation things you make, and also for in the film world, the whole new world of Dolby Atmos, you're doing very similar things. You're moving around automation on stems that you're recording at the same time. And so to be able to record the automation as you do it on the fly, and then of course, you might not get it absolutely perfect on the fly, But then you just go back into the automation as you would have done before and just tweak it up. But you haven't got to start again. You're not trying to recreate that mix that you did on the fly, which you never recreate when you're trying to do it artificially. There is something about getting hold of faders and doing it on the fly live that just gives that real performance part of working with a mix. And so to be able to tweak to do that, record all that automation real time, and then just better go back and tweak it. So when you're recording automation on tracks that are in record, that is just going to be so useful and save loads of hours of work.
Now, of course, that also means that if you remember in Pro Tools 10, one of the cool features is that you can copy automation to clip gain and the other way around on the timeline. So basically, what you could do is send let's say, and often the recording mixer in post isn't the same as the dubbing mixer. Often they're two separate people.
Absolutely.
So to be able to send a Pro Tools file that has automation already written in for those kind of, let's say, volume changes that are live gig, let's say a vocal mic suddenly gets quiet and they have to push it back up again, or vice versa. To have that in, to be able to write it then into the gain is really quite cool. So that's a nice feature. It sounds like one of those features that they did in one of their they have hackathons, don't they, at Avid now?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly it was something that cropped up, and I'm so pleased it did, because you think that vocal situation, the live sound guy who's perhaps on tour with the band day in, day out, he knows exactly where all the pushes need to be. So rather than compressing it right out, he's riding that mix on the fader. He knows exactly where to push that line, because maybe the line's just getting a bit low, so the vocalist is at the bottom of their range, so they can't push it as hard, and he just manually pushes it up on the fader. Well, now we can log and we can record all that information. So when we come back to do the live mix of the album, all that information that's been gained over weeks and weeks of touring, all in the sessions, ready to go.
Yeah, very cool. So what's next on the list, Mike?
Dynamic host processing.
Now, this is exciting. This is interesting at the same time. The best way to describe this, and if you're watching the video, we'll put up a slide, but I'll try and explain it to you. If you imagine a session where, let's say, you've got backing vocals, and the backing vocals only appear in the choruses, and there's no audio. What I mean by no audio, that some people, they will have all their stems across the whole of their session. But other people, they will have their audio chopped up, smattered across the session, if everybody's with me now. So imagine that you've got vocals that only appear in the chorus, and there's a piece of audio, there's a clip of those backing vocals in each track in the song. Now, they only appear in the chorus and they don't appear anywhere else.
So you got fresh air, haven't you, in between each of those choruses?
You've got fresh air between that, or you've got fresh air between all sorts of tracks. A guitar solo is another one, but let's say a guitar solo's got an echo on it, a lexicon reverb, blah, 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 all those plugins. Pro Tools has a thing called dynamic host processing. If there's no audio on the timeline, it removes the CPU power from that to another part of the track, which is brilliant, which basically means that it's like fresh air isn't being treated as anything that needs processing anymore.
Yeah,
I think that's genius.
Absolutely, because it just takes the load off the computer, where you've got a plug-in sat there eating up processing power, processing nothing. So now Pro Tools can see where nothing is and take away the processing power.
And sometimes it is a plugin that can do that. Let's say you're using Slate's console applications, and you've got one on every channel. You've got a saturation, or even let's say the free Softube saturation knob. You've got that across every channel to emulate a console. Now, if you've got parts of the song where there's no audio, it takes the load. It removes the need for that load through that plugin. I think that's brilliant.
It is.
I think that's genius. So we don't know the whole story behind that yet, but it's very, very interesting. Mike, okay, we're going to go into geek mode now with you because in the old version of Pro Tools we had one metering standard, didn't we, Mike?
We did.
But they not only give us two. Tell us, this metering has completely been transformed, hasn't it, Mike?
It has, and not before time. I mean, the older Pro Tools systems, I always looked at the meter. Yes, it's good enough to tell me whether I've got audio going on to that track, but after that, I'm not really prepared to either understand what it's trying to tell me, how much audio is there, or anything else. Now, to be fair, the metering has improved, but even so, the current metering in Pro Tools 10 doesn't follow any of the particular audio standards of metering that we've got. So what Avid have done is, they've not given us 1 or 2 or 3 different standards. They've made 17 different metering options available. And
is that all?
Yeah, only 17, yes. Well, I mean, the bizarre thing is there are others, but they've given us the ones that really matter. So all the key industry standard ones, they've included Bob Katz's K-system metering. So you've got the standard VU, you've got the BBC PPM system, you've got the Nordic PPM, you've got all the different meterings. So any of you that have a conventional metering system that you're used to, you can now set your Pro Tools meters to that convention. And there's more, because one of the things they've done is to make sure that the meters are higher resolution, and in fact the meters will be 30% taller than the meters are on Pro Tools 10, and you get a gain reduction meter. So not only will you have your level meters, but next to it you'll get a little yellow gain reduction meter, and that gain reduction meter can display a number of things. It can display the gain reduction of a particular plugin on that track, or you can configure it to show the combination of gain reduction of a number of different dynamic plugins that you might have on that track. So it can give you the total gain reduction. And there's even more. The master tracks can be set to a different meter format to all the other tracks. So you can have a different meter format on your master tracks than to all your input tracks. So you've got loads and loads and loads of metering options. And that's just the metering on the main track down the side of the fader. There's lots more meters being added all over the place, isn't there, on the sends view, Russ?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because if some of you remember, there was an old trick you can do in a send. You could go to a send, let's say send A and E, and you could either select to show that each send was there, and then you'd have to click on that send, and it would pop up a fader that you'd work with, or you could press, what was the keyboard shortcut, Mike? Was it
Command
Control?
and click.
Command and click on it, and then you see a mini fader. But the trouble is that mini fader would inhabit the space of all of your 5 plugins. So you'd have to choose which send you were going to choose. So it would either show you send A, send B, send C, send D, send E, etc., etc. Now they're allowing you to have as many of those as you want, even to the case where you can actually hide the master fader, the faders at the bottom of the channel if you want. And that some of you may think that sounds a little mad, but there are people out there that mix matrix mode. So all they want is matrices of their faders. They don't mix via sends at the bottom. So basically you could see a reverb send, you could see an echo send, and you'd have a pile of faders across your channels. Now I think that's really cool. So you've got mini dynamics metering as well. So when you insert a dynamics effect plugin into any channel, or in fact any plugin, so a reverb, you will see on the end of the insert now, on the left there used to be that dot where you inserted something, and now on the right there's a little meter, and that meter shows you that there's activity going on. Now obviously it's not accurate enough to really make a big decision, but at least you can see that all of that stuff is sending somewhere. And so if sometimes you've got stuff sending around Pro Tools, you can't find out where it's coming from, you'll be able to see now what's sending from each channel, both with the mini sends view and the expanded sends view as well. Now I think, Mike, that's pretty cool.
It is. It does mean that you can leave it in what we used to call the assign mode. So you get your little box which told you where each send was going. But in that little box now, the right-hand end is a little meter. And then, instead of having to be able to just expand out to one send, we can expand all the sends. So if you can have 8 sends, you can have your A to E, F to J, all of them, all expanded. So you don't have to pick and choose, because I always used to reconfigure my sends so that I could have one of the A to E's in expanded mode and one of the F to J's in expanded mode. Don't need to do that anymore, and I can have all 10 in expanded mode. So that, again, very, very helpful.
Which is probably also a good time to bring up, while we're talking about this, another thing that has been a bit of a bind has been been bypassing and selecting plugins and inserts. Now, Shortcut Ninja, Mike, there's some new shortcuts, isn't there?
There are some new shortcuts.
And we're going to post them on this. We'll post a graphic of them on the site, but Mike will be ahead of you all because he already knows them.
Yes, he does. We have a number of shortcuts so that we can now actually bypass all the inserts. So if you've got a whole load of inserts on your on a particular track, you couldn't before bypass them all in one go. So if you had a series of plugins, one after the other, you'd have to go in and bypass them one at a time. So you couldn't do a before and after of, say, 3, 4, 5 plugins. Now you can. So you can go Shift and A, which will bypass all of them. If you want to bypass just the first block, so inserts A to E, you can do Shift 1, inserts F to J, Shift 2. You can bypass just EQs, Shift E, just dynamics, Shift and C, just reverbs, Shift and V, just delays, Shift and D, and the modulations, Shift and W. So you've got a whole raft of options, and they've all been designed up the left-hand end of the keyboard, so that although you need a modifier key, you can do them all with one hand.
Now, Mike, do I understand as well you can actually also disable a row of plugins on one channel, which was always a pain before? You can actually just take all your plugins, you can mute, you can bypass all the plugins from one channel, can't you? There's a shortcut for that too.
Yeah, there is.
Now that's pretty cool, and anything that helps you grow in your ninjaness, Mike, I'm sure is a benefit for you.
Absolutely, it's about speeding up workflow. Because somebody's actually thought about it, Shift and A for all, it kind of, it's not going to be that difficult to remember. The Shift is always the modifier key, dynamic Shift and C. Somebody's actually thought about what these should be. And also, I think it's fairly impressive that they found some spare combinations of shortcuts that haven't already been taken up.
That's really cool. So let's move on to now stuff that both of you have. I've worked in. I do a lot of video work. Mike, you work with a lot of video, and the video has been very, very sad for a long time in Pro Tools. It's always been either that I've had to create an MP4 or a H.264 and then drag it into Pro Tools, and it grinds it to a halt. And all that kind of stuff. And to be honest, it's always been slightly surprising because of they make media composers, so it was always a bit odd. And it looks like this time, as far as I understand, Mike, we now have media composer engine within Pro Tools. We do.
I mean, for me, video has always been a sort of hardly even a bolt-on, or sort of tied on with sticky tape to Pro Tools. And now, again, it's now in the foundations. So what Avid have done is to take their video engine, which is the same core engine that they use in Media Composer, and they've built that into Pro Tools. So it does mean that you can add, you can edit, and you can play a huge variety of HD video formats. So you can now play and edit the XD cam, which is becoming a very common format for HD cameras, especially in the broadcast world, to have that. So that's really useful. You can use the Avid HNX HD sequences straight into the Pro Tools timeline without transcoding. That was always the pain of our lives, because Pro Tools was very choosy about which video file formats it would work with. So you would have to spend ages transcoding from one format to another before you could play it in Pro Tools. And it took forever. And so now we don't need to do that. You can play these standard formats right within the timeline. That is really, really important. So you can now monitor the picture playback, and Avid have also improved the support for a whole range of interfaces. So again, for those of you on the video, it'll be a little easier because we've got a little slide for you. But there are interfaces they're supporting from themselves, Avid, from AJA and Blackmagic Design. So for Avid, Pro Tools 11 will now support the Avid Mojo DX and the Nitris DX boxes. And then from AJA, there's the Kona 3G, there's the Kona 3, the Kona LHI, the Kona LHE Plus, the IO Express, the IO XT, and the T-Tap. Those are all from AJA. And then they expect that all the Blackmagic Design products will work with Pro Tools 11. They have just put a little bit of a sort of caveat on it that some of the final support for these devices will be subject to final testing by AJA and Blackmagic. But I think the fact that they've been prepared to list the products that they expect to be able to use as video interfaces with Pro Tools to this extent and obviously their own Avid Mojo DX and Nitrous DX boxes definitely will work.
I tell you what's really cool as well, Mike, is of course that when you bring it in, if you've got issues with size and it's taking up too much CPU power, you can have the real video in Pro Tools, but then you can choose to play the proxy of it. It will play just a proxy version without taking up the CPU power. Now, that's very cool as well.
That really is really, really cool, because it means you can use a low-grade quality proxy version whilst you're working on Pro Tools, so it doesn't take shed loads of load. But often when you're using lower grade proxy versions, you cannot be convinced because of the way the data compression works on video files. You can't be sure about things like lip sync or particular hit points. And so to be able to just for a moment switch between the proxy and the full quality version to check something like lip sync or a key hit point, and then drop back into the proxy version, again, very well thought through, and is just going to make workflow so much easier.
Talking of workflow, of course, this isn't only for playback. You can also edit video within Pro Tools as well. I'm sure it's just going to be simple stuff. But we had one recently, Mike and I working on a project, and we had to take out a piece of video, and so that the audio and the video matched, and I had to do it in two products. Now, in future, I could go into Pro Tools, bring in the video, see that there was a scene that needed taking out, take that scene out, and still send the same Pro Tools file back to Mike to work on.
Yeah. Which again, just that basic facility to be able to edit video from within Pro Tools, because we're using the Avid video engine that's in Media Composer, to be able to do those basic edits within Pro Tools just makes so much difference.
Now, the next thing that's very cool and very helpful for those of us that have ongoing projects is that for the first time, you'll be able to run Pro Tools 10 and Pro Tools 11 on the same machine.
Wow.
That's very cool.
That is.
And I'm guessing that's also because there's going to be quite a lot of plugins that are still missing in the early days.
But also, presumably, because it's completely different code, we were never able to do that because the code was essentially very similar. So all the under-the-hood stuff was the same under the hood, whether you were running different versions. So you couldn't run two versions at the same time. And the last time we were able to run two versions on the same computer was Pro Tools 4 and 5, if memory serves me right. So and again, that was another key turning point. So to be able to run these two versions simultaneously, so that yes, if you've still got plugins that aren't AAX compatible yet, because remember with Pro Tools 11, RTAS does not work at all.
It's deceased.
It's deceased. Long overdue, but it will make a huge difference. And to be fair, very recently we've got so many more plugins now available for AAX, but there are still some that aren't. And so it does mean that if you've got a job, in work in progress, as it were, and you definitely need to use an RTAS plugin, you're not caught. You can run Pro Tools 10 and 11 on the same machine. So if you need to finish a job off in 10 because it's using RTAS plugins that aren't available in AAX, then you can do it.
Okay, Mike, of course, the $1 million question. In fact, there's a couple of things I want to say before we move to the $1 million question, of course, which is pricing too. Because remember when 10 came out, it was the best version of Pro Tools ever. But
yeah,
they shot themselves in the foot with their pricing, or if not the pricing, the messaging of that pricing. A couple of other things to say to you is it's got faster, more visual feedback and some new key commands that we talked about earlier. Some mixed window enhancements. There's also, of course, now the full benefit of using Apple's Retina displays. So supersonic graphics for Pro Tools. That's really nice on big, large screen monitors. So, Mike, let's move on to the $1 million question. First, Pro Tools HD. This was one of the areas last time that people got really upset about. Have we seen some movement this time?
We have. I think it would be fair to say we have seen some movement. And I think, again, when we start talking about these prices, please remember that it's not even a 1.0 upgrade, really. This is going from version 10 to version 20, really, in the terms of
it's a new piece of software.
It's a new piece of software, but they have, I think, learnt their lesson in terms of the pricing structure for upgrade. So Pro Tools 10 HD to Pro Tools 11 HD, so that's for both HD native and HDX users. The upgrade is $599, so $599.
Is that about half of what it was? Was it $1,000 last time? It's nearly half
Was
off,
pretty
isn't
well,
it?
yeah. And they've also done an upgrade offer for anybody who didn't go to Pro Tools 10. So if you are a Pro Tools 9 HD user, you can go to Pro Tools 11 HD for $999. So that is really good news for people who felt that they were not, it wasn't worth upgrading to Pro Tools 10, so they stuck on Pro Tools 9. Then you really do have the option to go to Pro Tools 11 now, get all the benefits of all these new features because of the 64-bit coding and the fact that they've started again. That's all really good news. So $599 for 10 to 11 HD and $999 for 9 to 11 HD. And then what I always describe as the Pro Tools Vanilla, so that's the non-HD software, some pretty good prices as well, Russ.
Yeah. 10 to 11 is now $299, so that's $300, which I think is okay, especially for what you're getting. 9 or earlier to 11 is $399, so that's a great deal for people who didn't go to 10.
Or even didn't go to 9. So if people that are still on 8LE can go straight to 11 for $399.
Yeah, it is. It's very good. So Academic. Now, I've had a chat with Avid about this because my understanding of Academic was that you had 4 years of free upgrades, whatever happened. This isn't the case with Pro Tools 11. Pro Tools 10 to 11 is a $99 upgrade for the Academic, and 9 to 11 is a $149 as well. As I say, I thought it was free, but perhaps I was wrong. I don't want to create a firestorm here, but that was my understanding of it. I don't know about you, Mike.
No, I certainly thought there was. Yes, there was a very much a preferential treatment for academic users, and clearly in the pricing that we're now looking at, because normal Pro Tools Vanilla from 10 to 11 is $300. And the academic users will be paying $100. So again, yes, all right, it's not free, but again, they have given the academic users a very, very preferential deal.
So, Mike, Complete Production Toolkit, we've got some news on that as well, yes?
Yes, Complete Production Toolkit is another RIP. It is going to be dead. It will be a product that that Avid are dropping to simplify the product range. So it's no longer going to be possible to take a version of Pro Tools Vanilla and add Complete Production Toolkit to get all the features that Pro Tools HD has. So what Avid are going to do is anybody who is currently on Pro Tools 10 and Complete Production Toolkit 2, so people that have already done that combination, you can upgrade to Pro Tools 11 HD even though you don't have the HD hardware, because again, prior to this, it was not possible from Avid to buy the HD software without the HD hardware, and effectively you still can't buy it separately. But for those people who effectively got the HD software by buying Pro Tools 10 and Complete Production Toolkit 2, you now have that opportunity to upgrade to Pro Tools 11 HD software for $999.
Okay, another thing is that Pro Tools Express owners will be able to go from Pro Tools Express to Pro Tools 11 for $499. So that if some of the new Akai gear is going to come with Pro Tools Express, and some of the Avid gear comes with Pro Tools Express, some of their interfaces. So that's a good deal as well. $499 to go from Pro Tools Express, which is basically a free piece of software, is a deal as well. There's an amnesty as well, 7th of April until release date of Pro Tools 11, which we understand is somewhere kind of May, June time. So it's an announcement right now. It's not out in the market yet. This is a pre-announcement, but it has to. But the good news is, of course, you have to remember, because the Avid are a listed company, they have to deliver this within 3 months of announcing it in that quarter of that business. So 7th of April, if you buy after the 7th of April, so you go out and buy a copy of Pro Tools 10 today, then you will get a free upgrade to Pro Tools 11 when it comes out.
That's it. So, but unfortunately, if you bought a copy of Pro Tools 10 yesterday, unfortunately, that's where they've drawn the line in the sand.
Yeah.
But it does mean that if you need to do an upgrade right now, You need to put the money aside. You know that if you were to buy a Pro Tools 10 system as of today, you will get Pro Tools 11 for free. You haven't got a budget for the upgrade. But that's where Avid have chosen to draw the line in the sand, and it's fairly normal practice for them. That's usually where they draw the line.
Great. So, Mike, that's it, really. We have come to the end of this presentation. Everything you wanted to know about Pro Tools 11, but were afraid to ask. And if you're listening to this, then go to YouTube and watch some of these slides that we're going to put up as well. If you're watching this on YouTube and you'd rather listen to it, then go over to our podcast and listen to it. But Mike will be out at NAB. He'll be getting some more information, hopefully interviewing some of the guys behind the new product. I'll be at Mesa, and we'll be doing the same thing. As soon as we've got our hands on copies of this, of course, we'll be giving you our feedback on it as well. But thanks for listening. I'm Russ Hughes.
And I'm Mike Thornton.
Good night from me.
And good night from me.